indecision. Now, those are the 4 things you do when you're great at that table, presenting and closing a sale. The final closing, this is the final closing, begins one of 3 ways. The first way it begins, now I'm talking, they know everything they need to say yes, and now I'm going to the final closing. The first way it starts is the buyer asks you a porcupine question, the answer to which you then write on the paperwork by saying, let me make a note of that. In other words, they go, Tom, will you train us to use the copier? You don't say yes. You smile and say, is training something you'd like? When he says yes, you then move right out of the form. Well, let me make a note of that. Training required, and I am closing the transaction. That's such a beautiful way to start. The second way it starts, number 2, you ask them what we call a final closing question, and it's a minor close. It's called the test close. So you ask them a test closing question. Gosh, I'd love you that are in sales to just turn to the buyer and just say this sentence. John, how are you feeling about all this so far? I didn't ask him to buy. I said, how do you feel? And when they say they feel good, that's when you know it's time to move right on to your paperwork by just saying, let me make a note of that. The next way it begins, see, there's 3 ways. The third way it begins is you just ask them a reflex question and move on to your paperwork. Now, there are more than this, but the most popular reflex questions. Number 1 is the date. Gang, you're well off if you don't know the date. Just smile and say, you know, John, I've been running at such a pace. Do you know the date? He gives it to you. Just thank him and put it on your form. And you're closing. Number 2, the correct spelling of the name. Don't do this with a Jones or Smith, but if it's Mr. Stenskowski, smile and say, Mr. Stenskowski, can you help me with that spelling? Well, I sure can. He spells it. You fill it out on the form. The third way, which was my favorite, was you ask the middle initial. Mary, did you have a middle initial? She says B. You say, let me make a note of that, and you on the paperwork. And you're going to have such fun when you make this happen. Now, here's another very, very critical point. When you finish filling out any form, you pick it up, you scan it for correctness, and deliver your final closing sentence. You want to write your own. Let me give you an example. Here's what we call just a generic one. John, with your approval right here, we'll set up delivery for next week. And there you've asked him to put his signature on it. Now here is the most critical instruction I'll ever give you, and I learned this many years ago. Whenever you ask the final closing question, and you that are taking notes, you can score this big. When you ask that final closing question, you must shut up. See, if you talk, you'll end up owning it. Let them have it. Now this takes a little work because it's nerve-wracking, but when you smile and say, John, I'll need your approval right here, and you shut up, all he can do is either give you the reason he's not going ahead or put his approval on the paperwork. I'd like to have you join a very elite group, and those are the people who know how to handle the words, I want to think it over. Now, all of you in sales are going to hear, I want to think it over. And I'd love you to learn what to say, because this is the most important thing you're going to do in all your career is when they say they want to think it over. You want to smile and be real nice and just learn these words. You say, oh, that's fine, Mary. Obviously, you wouldn't take your time thinking this thing over unless you were seriously interested, would you? I mean, I'm sure you're not telling me that to get rid of me, so may I assume that you'll give it very careful consideration. She will agree. Then you simply say, just to clarify my thinking, what phase of this opportunity is it you'd like to think over? Is it the quality of the service I'll render? Is it the color? Is it something I've forgotten to cover? She says no to all of that, and then you simply say, seriously, level with me, could it be the money? Because 9 out of 10 times, it is the money. She will say the next thing. Tom, I think it just costs too much. Please, when anyone says it costs too much, just smile and say, you know, today most things do. Can you tell me about how much too much you feel it is? Now you get an amount of money. Then you move to the next strategy, which is called the reduction to the ridiculous, where you take an amount of money, find out how many years they're going to enjoy the product, get it to an annual amount, then go to a monthly, then to a weekly, then to a daily. See, a home that's only 25 cents a day too much is easy to accept rather than a home that's $3,000 more than they want to pay. And that reduction to the ridiculous is a fabulous technique, all right? The last thing I want to share with you is this. You got to learn to psych up every day in business. No athlete walks on the court of the field without getting some adrenaline pumping. So I'm going to ask you to learn how to psych up, and I'd love you to start tomorrow morning by saying this with enthusiasm 3 times in the morning. Today, I will win. Why? I'll tell you why. Because I got faith, courage, and enthusiasm. Let me hear you do that. Today, I will win. Why? I'll tell you why. Because I have faith, courage, and enthusiasm. You do that 3 times, that adrenaline gets pumping. I'll tell your spouse what you're doing. You'll get out of that shower excited for the day. And you got to be excited today. I've so enjoyed presenting this and so hope you'll take the ideas, apply them tomorrow. Have a greater income. Be the person of your dreams. Thank you so much.